Today I'm going to be interviewing Nina Ponsetto, a 21-year-old young woman from Brazil who currently attends GW. So first, can you just tell us about how did you grow up, where did you live?
So I grew up in São Paulo, Brazil. I was born and raised there. And I lived in an apartment in a really nice, safe neighborhood in the middle of downtown São Paulo, which, for those who don't know, is the biggest city in Brazil and one of the biggest in the world. There are 30 million people living there. So, yeah, that's where I grew up.
Wow. And can you describe your family and your parents' relationship?
Sure. My mom, she's 50 now. She's the CEO of a company, and she comes from a European family. My grandpa worked in the Bank of Brazil, so my mom spent her childhood just traveling around Europe. She mostly spent her childhood in London and Germany. And my dad comes from a really poor family from São Paulo, Brazil. So my dad spent his childhood living in favelas, which are like our slums in Brazil.
And so was their relationship frowned upon or anything, or was it okay?
Well, in the beginning it was great. My mom came to Brazil after she got her MBA because my grandparents were coming back to Brazil for a couple of years. And she met my dad, and they had me. And then they got married. And in the beginning, everything was great between them. But between the families, it was a little rough. My mom's family didn't really approve that my dad didn't come from a good family. He only finished high school. Meanwhile, my mom had her MBA from Europe. So that was a little tough for them. But between the two of them, I think for my mom, it was easier than for my dad because she was the one who lived very well. She didn't see any problems. My dad, of course, felt a little inferior. She was the woman. My country is very machista, which is like the man's supposed to be providing, and my mom was always providing. So I think for my dad, it was a little hard to have my mom being like the voice of authority. But apart from that, I think they didn't have big issues with it.
And it worked out. You have a great family.
Yeah, well, they got a divorce. They are divorced.
Okay.
When I was 12, my parents got divorced. Now my mom is remarried, and my dad is currently single. But it was a very, easy divorce. It wasn't nasty at all. They ran out. It was 10 years of marriage, and then they thought it wasn't working. So it wasn't like it was nasty and all of a sudden something happened. It just ended.
And do you think their divorce had to do with their different upbringings or anything?
I definitely think so. I think it wasn't about the money. I think it was they saw life differently and they had different values. My mom traveled her entire life, so she put traveling as a big thing, and family as well. My dad was always trying to prove that he could do something in terms of his profession. Because he came from such a poor family, he needed to show the world that he could go high. And my mom really didn't care for it. She just wanted to travel and take care of her family. And eventually, I think that took a big toll on their relationship. They just had different ways of leading their lives.
Right. Okay. And can you describe a little bit about the slums that you saw, from what your father had come from?
Yeah. Well, my grandmother still lived in the slums. So it was actually, it was interesting because, for example, I would go to my grandmother from my mother's side lived in London. So one weekend I would be in London with my grandma in a huge house in the suburbs of England. It was beautiful. I'd get everything I wanted, and then I would come back. And the morning that I come back, I would go to the slums to see my grandma from my dad's side. And literally, it's just a lot of people living in the same place, and it's an awful place that people build their own houses with paper and metal, and there's hardly bricks. So it was just a completely different lifestyle. But at the same time, and when I say that, it sounds really sad, but I remember just liking to go, I would rather go to my grandma's house on my dad's side and on my mom's side because they were so tight. They were so together. I remember sitting in the kitchen of my grandma from my dad's side and just being so happy there because everybody was in the same room talking to each other and just being happy and sharing a meal. Meanwhile, in my mom's side of the family, when we went to London, it was all about what we were doing. How cool it is that we're all going to this museum and we all get to the VIP seats for everything. And in the end, I would much rather be in a small room with a bunch of people sharing a meal that they didn't even know if they would get it again, than being in a big fancy restaurant and nobody has anything in common and you're just sitting there and eating the meal.
Wow. Yeah. And so when you say everyone, does that mean there was more family there from the
Well, it
slums?
was my brother. I have a younger brother, 3 years younger than I am. And then, well, when I went to my grandma from my dad's side, she had another son, my dad's brother, and he was younger. He's like 3 years older than I am, so when I used to go there, he was like 15, so he was always in the house. And in my mom's side of the family was my grandpa that was there too, so.
Right. So you were pretty close in age to your dad's brother?
Yes, like
Yeah.
3-4 years, yeah.
And so did you, like, notice a difference in the way you both viewed life or your outlook on things?
With my
Your uncle.
definitely. I mean, my mom made plenty of money when I was a kid, so I was lucky enough that I had any future I wanted. Since I'm very young, I was taught that whatever I wanted, I would get it. It was not about the money. It was not. You're a person. You should want whatever in the world, and you should just go and get it. Meanwhile, I could see my uncle. He didn't even know if he was going to finish high school. And I remember being a kid and being so frustrated because I couldn't understand why you wouldn't think ahead. And how I saw it when I was young, I was like, how could you be so dumb and not see that there's a future ahead of you? And then I grew up to understand that it's just the means that you're in. Nobody has that future. So who are you to dream about a future that you don't know anyone who has it? And I grew up in a family and in an environment where all of my friends' parents were very successful, had everything they wanted. So why wouldn't I want that too?
Right. And so do you think that, like, that experience has made you grateful, or how has it affected your future?
It definitely makes me really humble. I think that I went to a private school in Brazil, and I remember one of the hardest things for me was listening to my friends talking about how they just spent $10,000 in the bar yesterday, and I'll stop and I'll be like, I don't understand. And it's not that I wouldn't condemn them. If you have that money, you want to spend it, that's great for you. But it was just really hard for me to understand how you wouldn't see that there's people that could do so much with that money. And it just makes me appreciate what I have and understand that I'm not only lucky, meaning there's a small percentage of people in the world that are lucky enough to have the opportunities that I have, but in terms of my uncles and my cousins don't have these opportunities. So I look at them like lack of opportunity to me has a face. I can see them and they're relatable. I can call them and ask what they're doing, and I realize that they don't go to college. Meanwhile, my parents can pay for me to go to college in America. And that makes me understand the value of money and the value of just having opportunities.
Right. That's awesome. And was there ever a time in your childhood that you thought you could lose these opportunities or lose anything you had? Or
I think that no, because the way my parents framed opportunities to me was always that it isn't about money, it's about how hard you work for it and if you have creativity enough to want it. So it's just opportunities, of course. It has to do with your parents being able to afford for you to have higher education. But in Brazil, for example, higher education is actually for free. So it's just a matter of understanding that that's for free and being creative enough to know how to get there. So I was never scared to lose it because once I realized that anything I want is just a matter of figuring out a way to get there, I knew that even if yesterday my mom lost her job, I could still find a way to stay in America. It's just a matter of knowing that's what I want and then figure out how to do it.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And so I know a little bit about moments in your childhood, and I know that you've had like some crazy experiences. So can you describe your most scary or crazy childhood experience?
I think that my most crazy experience was when I was about 10 years old. I went to a friend's birthday party, and my mom was picking me up, and we actually got kidnapped. So, and it sounds really scary. Really wasn't that scary, but I will explain it. We were walking. I mean, we were in the car, and then two guys. We were waiting. There was huge traffic, and I remember it was a costume party, so I was wearing like the evil stepmother from Snow White's costume. And I was just there hanging out. And then 3 guys knocked in my mom's car window with guns. And being from Brazil, we kind of know the drill. So you know that they want to come in. And you shouldn't panic. You shouldn't just... My mom just took her seatbelt off, went to the passenger seat, and then the guys came in. So 1 came in to drive the car, and 2 came in right next to me. And they said, just drive us to the nearest bank so we'll withdraw all your money. And so far, like, that's what they said to us at that moment. So we were in the car, and it sounds really scary, but the thing about really scary situations is you get really numb. So I wasn't feeling anything. I can tell you I was